is slow, so we'll go ahead and get started in the interest of time. Thank you for joining, everyone. This is the Decision 7 School Day and Calendar Redesign webinar, orientation webinar for TCLAS. We're excited to kick off the work this year, both for Cycle 1, Cycle 2, Cycle 3, and Cycle 4. We'll learn more about that in a bit, but welcome. Thank you for joining us at the end of everyone's favorite day of the week, Tuesday. And we'll start with some introductions here. My name is Brian Doran. I'm the Director of Expanded Learning Models here at TEA. And I'll let Shaylin pop off mute here to introduce herself.
Hey y'all, my name is Shaylin Macedonio. I am the Summer Learning Project Manager on the Additional Days School Year or Adzy team.
Great. So today is pretty straightforward. We started with welcome and introductions. We're going to then get into some TCLAS award next steps. So the meat of how to make sure that you're getting your grant funding that you're awarded. We'll then jump into decision specific deep dive, so more about Decision 7, and then we'll recap those next steps. So a quick couple housekeeping items here. If you do have questions, by all means ask them, but please put them in the Q&A box. It keeps it a lot easier for us to actually make sure that we're responding to everything. And then the second thing, this recording and these slides will be posted on tea.texas.gov/TCLAS. We'll also send it out via email as soon as it's ready. This says shortly after this webinar concludes. It'll likely be tomorrow before we get that up, given what time it is right now. All right. So TCLAS next steps. So there are a couple next steps here to make sure that you are getting the actual grant funds that you have been awarded. And this applies across different initiatives, but includes Decision 7 here. So the first is complete an award confirmation survey. Your district, your LEA has already done that. And that is why you're here. So the second one is then complete the program onboarding. So for us, for Decision 7, that is a onboarding orientation kickoff webinar. You're here right now. And then there's some additional pieces that we'll talk through throughout the course of this webinar today. And then the final step for TCLAS specifically for the awards is to complete the EGrants application. And so this will open in mid-September if it's not open already, and then closes October 29th. I do want to highlight here, this is processed on a first come, first served basis, which given the timeline that we're working with for Cycle 2 districts, we'll talk about a bit more later, but just highlighting that right now. So we are at the tail end of these orientation webinars right now, Decision 7, 4 to 5 p.m. Next week, there are also some specific, or over the course of the next couple weeks, there are some specific eGrants office hours that we want to highlight. So these occur on Fridays, generally 9 to 10 a.m. So this Friday there is one, the 1st, the 15th, and the 29th. So strongly encourage you to attend those if you are on the team that is managing the eGrants process for your district. There is also a webinar here that took place last Friday from 9 to 10 a.m. So if you weren't able to join that, that will be available soon on tea.texas.gov/TCLAS. And then here are some links as well for the ongoing office hours over the course of the next couple of weeks. So again, we'll be sending out these slides both in a follow-up email. They'll also be posted on tea.texas.gov/TCLAS. So all this information should hopefully be pretty easily accessible to you. Just want to flag these opportunities for making sure you're getting that eGrants application in. All right, let's go ahead and dive a bit deeper into Decision 7. What is the school day / calendar redesign? And to start here, we're going to just ground in everything that we all know, right? So COVID has caused additional learning gaps for students, and we've seen some substantial drops in student achievement, specifically in math, but in both math and reading. So this is really the grounding, the basis of what we are trying to solve for. And this is on top of the compiled implications and issues that we've seen with summer slide as well over the course of years and years of data, where students from lower income backgrounds have a lack of academic opportunities over the course of summer that oftentimes lead to slide in academic achievement over the course of summer. And so we know in order to catch our students back up, we need to make some significant changes. This can look like rigorous instructional materials. This can look like some supported teachers. And then this can also look like more time for students and making sure that those students have the opportunity to actually to make up that instruction and accelerate that instruction. So expanded learning time is one of the key strategies for COVID response. And that is where Decision 7 comes into play. So we know if we're dealing with more time, there's many different ways to address that. That includes summer, that includes tutoring, longer school days, things like that. What we're talking about here is a little bit different and more of an extended year model. We're looking at an opportunity that we have to really address some ongoing stressors that we have for both students and teachers. So from a student perspective, we know that there's a wide research base out there that shows that students who have more access to free play and have more opportunity for that free time and brain break options do better academically. And so what we see though in oftentimes in the school day is limited time for brain breaks, limited time for play, limited time for things like enrichment for those students. On the teacher side, we know that especially in elementary school, teachers who are teaching all subjects can be responsible for a huge number of student expectations over the course of an academic year. It's not unheard of to hear of teachers working 12-hour workdays with minimal breaks, and it's also all too common to have limited opportunities for job-embedded planning. So we are taking a look at redesigning the school year. And to do that, we're going to take 180 reimagined school days, and we're going to add 30 additional school days to those 180. This will get us to 210 total. We're going to then change the schedule in each day by slightly reducing the daily academic instruction. We'll add that back through the additional school days that we're adding on. And then each day we'll be able to add, for example, an additional recess and an additional specialist rotation. The specifics of what this looks like will vary depending on what the actual design process ends up dictating for your campus and for your LEA. But the goal is to do this each day. So there's a more sustainable day every single day for both students and teachers. This is a pretty robust change, and there's a lot of unsaid components involving that would be involved in this, right? And so to do this, we are running what's called the Additional Days School Year Planning and Execution Program. And what this does is pair a strong redesign planning process where you are going through a robust strategic plan to think about and plan for all the key components that you need to address in order to get this redesign done. And then you're pairing that with long-term sustainability from Additional Days School Year funding. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, Additional Days School Year, Adzy, provides half-day formula funding for school systems, in particular elementary schools, to provide additional extra instructional days, and that's beyond a minimum of 180 days and up to 210 total. And so this is for any elementary campus, grades pre-K through 5. So we're pairing essentially the strong planning process of, okay, how can we really go about redesigning our school day and our school calendar for both student and teachers' needs? And then how can we make that sustainable through ongoing funding through things like Additional Days School Year through the Adzy funding. And so this is called the Adzy Planning and Execution Program, Adzy Pep, full year redesign grants. And so let me pause here real quick. Decision 7 says school day / calendar redesign. We are going to use this interchangeably with Adzy Pep full year redesign grant. And so if I slip sometimes say full year redesign, I mean decision 7. If I say decision 7, I also mean full year redesign for Adzy Pep. And what Adzy Pep is again, it's a year-long planning process initially. So we have a calendar up here that describes this process specifically for cycle 2 districts, and I'll talk about that on the next slide. But specifically for cycle 2 districts, those who are starting the planning year this upcoming year, 21-22. So we are right here, the orientation webinar here in September, and we will be going through a process, including workshops with a learning community facilitator over the course of this fall in order to develop what we're calling strategic plan part 1. And you will also be contracting with a technical assistance provider to support you in this process as well over the course of this entire year. We will then continue into strategic plan part 2 over the course of the winter. We'll have a couple workshops in spring to continue utilizing the cohort that we have here of folks all implementing a similar change. And then we also have strategic plan part 3 in spring next year, kind of doing the get across the finish line components of the planning process. So one comprehensive strategic plan separated out into 3 parts. A series of workshops with the learning community of similar districts going through the same process, technical assistance providers who are supporting you through that process and whose goal is to make that planning process easier for you. And then a series of milestones throughout the planning process to get us there. So planning part 1 approval in late November. We have high quality instructional materials selection around January, February. So we'll talk a bit more about that in a second. We have planning part 2 approval in mid to late February, and then you'll be taking this to your local board for approval to make sure that your board is on board with the changes that you are proposing. And then finish out with planning part 3 review, approval, feedback before entering the program execution. And so program execution will be a lighter lift in the planning year from a Adzy Pep programming standpoint. However, it's when you really dive into the actual, let's provide this programming for students, right? Following the planning year, you will implement the following school year, which will look like essentially most likely in July, starting that school year. And you'll then go through a series of kind of data checkpoints to make sure that you are addressing kind of what's going on at that campus in a continuous improvement mindset. So this will include interim assessments, pre and post as well. This will include an annual reflection process, looking at ongoing data, things like attendance, student surveys, teacher perception surveys, things like that. And then also just this ongoing high quality instructional materials component, ensuring that you're looking at not just how you're using your time, but or not just adding more time, but how you're using your time with that instruction piece. All right, so this is Adzy Pep in a nutshell. This is essentially the planning process and then the execution process that you'll be going through as part of Decision 7. It is a robust process. It is intended to be something that hopefully uncovers most, if not all, of the pieces that you need to plan for in order to implement a full year redesign utilizing Adzy funding. That being the case, we have a number of supports along the way. And so I'm going to skip this next slide to start with the supports. The first one is support 7A. This is technical assistance providers who will be whatever the idiom is, in your end, in your lane, in your whatever that idiom is. These will be your partners in this work, right? To make sure that your planning process goes well. So we have 5 pre-vetted vendors, Always Be Learning, Engage to Learn, 4 Point Education Partners, Software Partners, and then WestAt in combination with Resources for Learning. And each of the districts on this call received a base funding amount of 100,000 plus 15,000 per campus for those of you who are just starting the planning process. Their goal will be to help you complete this strategic planning process and to support you as you get prepared for things like presenting your plan to the board, getting approval for your updated calendar, and thinking through all of the pieces and operational minutia that it will take to implement a full year redesign. And so as part of Support 7A, there are 3 action items that we'll have coming up over the course of the next couple of weeks. Following this webinar in the next, likely tomorrow, we'll be sending a follow-up email that will include a needs analysis. This is a quick exercise designed to say, like, here are our strengths as a district, here's where we could particularly use support, and we will use this to basically match you with the design and implementation vendor based off of the strengths of the design and implementation vendors. So that will be due Tuesday, September 28th. And then at that point, we will take those completed needs analyses and conduct the matching process over the next couple of days. And by Friday, October 1st, we are aiming to send you your recommended design and implementation vendor. And so the follow-up action there is to connect with that design and implementation vendor and talk through what it might look like to contract with them. And finally, we are aiming for a October 15th date to confirm your intent to contract with your recommended vendor, or if there are some changes, confirming that with the TEA team and with those vendors. Recognize that this is a quick turnaround timeline, and also recognize that we're dealing with local procurement policies and things like that. And so this is our goal deadline. As we're getting into the process and going along this, please do reach out as we get further along and identify any barriers that might exist with these deadlines. The other thing here is this is for cycle 2 only. And so at risk of jumping around too much, I am going to go back to that slide that I skipped. Okay. Quick explanation here around cycles. So you, in your application, each LEA, each district applied to start their planning process in a specific year. And so what we have is associated Adzy Pep cycles according to those planning years. Cycle 1 are districts who have already completed the planning process in the previous year, and they are currently in year 1 of implementation. Cycle 2 are folks who are starting the planning process this year, this 21-22 school year, and the goal will be to implement the Adzy Pep full year redesign in 22-23. Cycle 3, we're pushing that back 1 year. So this is folks who will be planning in the 22-23 school year, and who will then run their first Adzy Pep full year redesign in 23-24. And then finally, cycle 4, I believe there's only one of you on this call. You would be looking at a 23-24 planning year and then implementing in 24-25. The goal is then to run 3 execution years in those execution year cycles. I do also want to flag, based off of earlier experience, that you may or may not know explicitly which cycle you're a part of. One way to find out is through the grant confirmation. You would have received your award notification saying you are approved for Decision 7. This includes planning in X year and execution in X year. So if you take a look at that and you see that you're planning in 22-23 and executing in 23-24, that means you're part of cycle 3. And then likewise for 21-22 and 22-23. All right, so jumping back now to the supports. All right, so let me recap again now that I've covered cycle 1 through cycle 4. Let me recap support 7A. Support 7A is the technical assistance to help you in your planning process. You received $100,000 plus $15,000 per campus for your planning year. And then you have 3 action steps associated with that support. So first is to complete a needs analysis by Tuesday, September 28th. The second is to connect with your recommended design and implementation partner by Wednesday, October 6th. And then the third is to confirm your intent to contract by Friday, October 15th. All of these deadlines are for cycle 2 districts only. For cycle 3 districts and cycle 4 districts, we will go through this process next year, and you don't need to worry about this right now. All right, the next component of support that we have for the Adzy Pep process is what we're calling support 7B, and it is funding for an Adzy project manager and then an associated steering committee to help guide the planning process. So there are 2 associated action steps here over the next couple of weeks. The first is to designate or hire a project manager by Monday, November 1st. If you already have one designated or hired, that is even better. That November 1st is ambitious if you're just starting to hire right now, but we do need to get the ball rolling for cycle 2 districts. And so support 7B provided a base funding of $125,000 for your planning year, as well as each additional eligible year that you applied to. You will have the opportunity then to use that funding for the project manager. And then we also have seen some districts in the past utilize this funding as well for things like planning stipends for additional members of the planning team. I do also want to flag that we are anticipating an in-person workshop, one in-person workshop for each planning, for each cycle. And so personnel funds can be used for travel for that workshop. This is, of course, pending health and safety regulations and making sure that everything is okay to be able to travel. The second component here is a steering committee, and we're wanting to designate a steering committee by Monday, November 1st as well. So these are the 2 personnel key actions that we're really looking to ensure that these 2 pieces are done by November 1st, and the earlier the better. A quick double click on the steering committee here. So given everything that is involved in the changes that would be required for a full year redesign, we have found, especially with those districts who have gone through this process last year, that a strong steering committee is absolutely critical to getting this across the finish line for the first year of execution. And so what we recommend and are a series of folks on that steering committee. The first is a CFO or finance lead. And this piece is required given the intricacies around the funding components of implementing a full year redesign. Then we also recommend a series of additional folks on this steering committee. Teachers, potentially a curriculum specialist, enrichment partner, campus principal, folks from the operations team, transportation, and anyone else within your district that it makes sense to bring into these frequent conversations and make sure that all the pieces are being accounted for. All right, and then the third support that was available through TCLAS is operational funding. So one of the key requirements in order to be able to use additional days school year funding, Adzy funding, is to have a core calendar that is at 180 instructional days. And recognizing that many districts across the state are operating at fewer than 180 instructional days, support 7C is intended to help alleviate getting up to the 180-day requirement. And so the general formula for this was number of students enrolled at each participating campus multiplied by an average of $52 of ADA per day, multiplied by 5 days. So basically 5 days of ADA for each campus. This is general revenue dollars. And so this is, you're able to use these funds as you need to for both for Adzy as well as any other pieces that your district might need. The associated deadline here, the associated action item is essentially to complete your EGrants application and accept that award through that EGrants application process. And that deadline is Friday, October 29th. And this deadline is for every single cycle. So that's cycles 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that applies for not only for 7C, but also for formally accepting 7A and 7B, the technical assistance funding and the personnel funding as well. All right, so those are the supports, 7A, 7B, 7C, along with 6 next steps for those supports. I'll have a slide here in a bit recapping all 6 next steps in one slide to get a better idea all in one page. Before I get to that, I do want to also recap a couple key assurances for participating in Decision 7. And this has been part of the process through the confirmation survey, as well as in the original TCLAS guidance document. There are a series of assurances here about what you are agreeing to do over the course of this planning and execution process, and by accepting these funds, what you're agreeing to do. A couple ones that I do want to pop out and highlight. One is be able to meet all of the Adzy and Adzy Pep implementation requirements. So that's things like the 180 days. And that's also things like adding 30 days of 6-hour days with more of those student brain breaks and more of that teacher planning time. You're also committing to building a strong steering committee, including a representative from the finance team. Again, we've seen this to be critical for success for districts who are implementing the next year. And then also agreeing to utilize high quality instructional materials. And we define that as materials that are on Texas Home Learning, materials that are highly rated on Texas Resource Review, materials that are highly rated on Ed Reports and aligned to the TEKS, or materials that are reviewed with a TA provider with a Texas Resource Review rubric and highly rated. So there are 4 kind of categories there that qualify as high quality instructional materials. We will certainly cover that later on in some learning communities, but I do want to highlight that early on, just to flag that that will be an expectation for folks as we go through this process. I also want to highlight that there are a number of different organizations that are supporting us, us being districts and the state of Texas throughout the course of this work. So first, TEA is the grant maker. We are the ones who are awarding the funds. That's why the EGrants is going through EGrants. We also have a great partner with the Texas Impact Network. They're serving as essentially an advisory capacity and helping with the work. And then we also have a learning community facilitator, Education Resource Strategies. They conducted the learning community last year and are excited to jump in with our next groups, next cycle. And then we have 5 technical assistance providers. So I named them earlier: Always Be Learning, Software Partners, 4 Point Education, Westat, and Engage to Learn. So there is a series of folks here who are all involved in this process in a number of different ways. Don't be surprised to see emails from folks at Education Resource Strategies throughout this process as well. And speaking of, we will also be kicking off over the course of fall. I named that there were a number of workshops that we'll be conducting. The first one is Wednesday, October 6th from 9 to 11 a.m. Central. We'll be sending out invites for all of these from Education Resource Strategies. And there will be some minimal pre-work involved with this first workshop. So just flagging that will be emailed in the next couple of days. But we are trying to keep that pre-work to a minimum. So you are, as we know, everyone is kicking off all of the TCLAS initiatives all at the same time right now. Wednesday, October 7th is our second workshop. We have a deadline for phase 1 of the strategic plan at Friday, October 29th. Recognizing this is coming up quick, phase 1 is intended to be just a initial design phase. It is not meant to be a huge lift. So while it might be daunting to see a deadline so quickly down the road, this is meant to be a lighter lift in phases 2 and phases 3. November 17th, we have another learning community workshop. And then December 8th, we have another learning community workshop. All of these dates are for cycle 2 only. If you are in cycle 3, we'll see you next year for a similar planning process and execution the following year. All right, I do want to recap then. So we have both upcoming dates for some workshops, and then we also have next steps for the specific supports. So for support 7A, 3 next steps. First is completed technical assistance needs analysis. We'll email that out in the next day and send the completed version to adzy@tea.texas.gov. Step 2 is then to connect with your recommended design and implementation partner by Wednesday, October 6th. That's just have that initial connection, make sure that you are talking and having those discussions around fit and what you are looking to complete over the course of this year. And then step 3 is notify your selected design and implementation partner of your intent contract by Friday, October 15th. Support 7B is personnel. There are 2 steps associated with this. That's step 4, that's hire or designate an Adzy Pep project manager by Monday, November 1st. The earlier the better for doing this. So if you are currently on this call and you're saying this is, yes, I'm the decision 8 contact, then awesome, that's great. If not, please, I just want to underscore that this is also a very critical role that we've seen over the course of the last year of folks that implemented in cycle 1. And so the earlier that you can get started on this, the better. We're also looking for designation of a cross-departmental Adzy Pep steering committee by Monday, November 1st. And then support 7C is operations funds. So everyone, including cycles 1, 3, and 4, will need to apply and submit their EGrants application by Friday, October 29th in order to receive those funds. This EGrant step applies for receiving the funds for all 3 of these steps. And I do want to highlight that we are working with, for cycle 2 in particular, we are working on a quick timeline, recognizing the amount of planning and careful stakeholder management that this type of change requires. And so the earlier that you can get your EGrants application in there and get those funds processed, the better. So again, this Friday, October 29th is the deadline, but if you can get that in earlier, then you'll be in a much better place for processing those funds. One additional opportunity that I do want to flag here, this is a robust change. This takes a lot. This is has financial implications. What we're talking about with Decision 7 and a school day and calendar redesign. I do want to flag that there is an opportunity, since you are a part of the Adzy Planning and Execution Program, you are essentially invited to participate in the Texas CFO Strategy Network. And so this is a network that is being run in conjunction with the Texas Impact Network and TEA, and it will equip CFOs to create processes, structures, and policies to help their systems align the district resources with the designs that meet the needs of all students. So you'll be grouped into cohorts of similar sized districts to facilitate cross-district sharing and ensure that that content and discussions feel relevant to your system context. And we really see this as an opportunity that will couple nicely with going through a process like Adzy Pep. And so next steps here, look for an email from Bridget Worley at texasimpactnetwork.org with information about the program, as well as directions for signing up if you are so interested. And then also share that email with your superintendent and school business official for consideration there. All right, I'll move into closing here before jumping into Q&As. I do want to flag, especially at the tail end of a week of TCLAS initiative webinars, Decision 7 is intended to be a heavy lift, and it is intended to have a large impact for our students. And so we are addressing a number of different things to try and reduce the impact of COVID, as well as make a more sustainable day for teachers and students. It's designed to have a significant and lasting impact on learning acceleration, but also requires a significant amount of time and effort from you and your staff. And so if after today's webinar, you don't believe that you're able to fully commit to all requirements and assurances, please do reach out to tclass@tea.texas.gov and we can talk about it. We certainly recognize that there's a lot going on right now. We also know that this can be a tremendously impactful initiative and are truly excited to kick off this work with you, in addition to the large number of supports that the Adzy Pep process provides. But do reach out if you do have concerns here. All right, so recapping next steps from TCLAS, you've done your confirmation survey. We just did the kickoff webinar. There are the next steps that we covered on a slide or two prior. And then really this big one, complete your eGrants application here by October 29th, and the earlier the better. All right, let's jump into some Q&A. All right, great question on, so the assurance around high quality instructional materials. Is this a requirement to use during the entire school year or just during the additional days? This would be for the entire school year. So we want to make sure that the materials being used are defined as high quality for that entire process. Another question around a template for the job description for the project manager. We'll do some digging for that. I think, I imagine we'll be able to find one from some of our Cycle 1 districts, and we can share that out once we have that. Great flag there, Christian. Is the vendor paid out of our grant funds? Yes, absolutely. So those 7A funds, the TA provider funds, those should be utilized specifically for that vendor. Blaine, thank you for fixing my idiom. In my corner, in my corner. So TA providers are in your corner to help your planning process.
Just a reminder to everyone, this webinar recording and slides will be posted online at the TCLAS website in the next couple of days. So you can always go back and reference some of these slides afterwards.
All right, so we spoke of a steering committee when talking about 7B, which is the personnel component. If a district did not apply to 7B, do they still need a steering committee? Yes, this is a pretty critical piece of the planning process that we identified for through our experience with Cycle 1. Both the identification of a key contact, a project manager at each district, as well as a steering committee. So we can talk about what that looks like if you do want to email adzy@tea.texas.gov if you have more specific questions. You can either hop on a call or talk about that via email. But that is a requirement for the process. Does the Adzy project manager need to be a full-time staff member? We're not sure that this person would have enough to do for the entire project period. Could this be a stipend for extra duties assigned? This is a little bit nuanced. For some of our larger districts, it almost certainly would be a full-time staff member from what we've seen. For smaller districts, there definitely could be some layers of expectation here. I think what we would expect is that it's essentially one FTE across the people who are conducting the work over the course of the year. So yes, it can be used to stipend the 7B funding can also be used to stipend others for ongoing support or for that planning process, in addition to pay for the project manager. All right, keep coming with any questions. I think we still have a bit of time here if we need. Yes, so sorry, I mentioned stipends for planning team members, essentially using that language synonymously with the steering committee. So I think that can vary. We did see, I think, a district last year stipend some of their school-based staff who maybe weren't officially on the steering committee themselves, but were doing a sizable amount of the planning process. And so that can vary so that could be both for the steering committee members or for others who are also going through the planning process and doing some of that work. All right, I'll wait for one more minute and then we'll do our final kind of closeout if nothing else pops up. Great clarification here. If we are not in cycle 2, do we still need to have a steering committee and project manager hired by November 1st? No. That will be as part of your planning year process. So if you're in cycle 3 or cycle 4, you can kind of pause on everything except for submitting your eGrants application until we reach out again to kick off the planning process for cycle 3 and 4. That said, you do absolutely need to complete your eGrants application by October 29th. These funds are available through that process, and this is the one opportunity to access those for that. So there's a question around, is the person you hire for 2 years or for 3 years? You can look at the amount that you were awarded for decision 7B, and basically it's a multiplier of 125,000. And so if you applied for and received 2 years of funding for that, it would then be 250,000. If you applied for and received 3 years of funding for that, it would be 375,000. So just treat that as a multiplier to verify how many years that you have that funding for that hire. A question around, do we need to select the vendor now? So vendor selection is for cycle 2. So for any districts who are starting the planning process in 21-22, we do need to select the vendor pretty quickly, given that they are one of the key supports and one of the pieces of the puzzle for completing the strategic plan. So it is a quick process. We do have pre-vetted vendors to support you through that process, and we will be making recommendations as well. And so, yes, that is a quick turnaround process for cycle 1, or excuse me, for cycle 2. Object code, I believe the object codes are, I might be wrong here, Jenny, but I believe, so sorry, the question is, will the funds have an object code of 5929? We might have to get back to you on that just to make sure that we're not spewing false information. So we'll get back to you on that one. October 29th so was the grant extended until October 29th? The eGrants application extended until October 29th. Previously thinking it was due October 15th. Everything that I've seen recently is October 29th. Certainly if, and this has been communicated in other webinars as well, we'll certainly do some double checking there, but if it is the 15th, we will do some very immediate communications out to folks, but assume October 29th. Another question for a job description for the project manager. We'll work on digging one up and send that out to the group as well. So you can take a look at what others have done for that job description. So October 29th is in writing in the slides right now. Shaylin, would you be able to pop over to the TCLAS website and just verify that it's there as well?
Definitely. All right, so I will pop this link in the chat. I'm looking at the TCLAS webpage. But it says step 3, complete EGrants application. Application opens mid-September. Application closes October 29th, and that is on the TCLAS webpage on TEA's website. I will copy it in the chat now.
Thank you. All right, seeing no further questions coming in. And so with that, thank you everyone for joining us on a Tuesday afternoon. We're very excited to be kicking off this work with everyone and continuing the network that we've started with cycle 1 and expanding that with cycles 2, 3, and 4. So very excited. Please reach out with any questions. If you have Decision 7 specific questions, you can email adzy@tea.texas.gov. If you have more generic questions around TCLAS, those can be directed to tclass@tea.texas.gov. But we'll try to get back to you as quickly as we can if you do reach out. And with that, I will go ahead and say farewell. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks everyone.